who's haven't been relieving pressure. I see they've been missed passes.
The execution not quite there, not as sharp as you'd like it to be.
Steal the puck here and try to spring Tippett again. He's got it. Oh, and Tippett in on goal again. The backhander, he scores! Persistence pays off for Owen Tippett. And his drought is over, and this game is tied at 1-1.
Great job by Forster to intercept that play in the defensive zone. And look at this backhand. I mean, you got pressure coming down on you. He tried it at the forehand before, keeps it to the bat, and now as a goaltender, you're thinking, no way is he going to backhand this puck in. At some point, you're...
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 244. I'm your host, Isaiah, and we're brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. And just a little add-on to the Summit Adjusters ad you just heard. We have Chef here who is licensed in Delaware, in addition to PA and New Jersey. Chef, what do you want to say about that as part of your opening statement?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're now able to help more people, PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. Well, we got other guys that are licensed down there, too. And any of these surrounding states, if you're in our listening view here in New York or Virginia or Maryland and all those areas, we do have connections with other adjusters that can take care of you in those states as well, too. So we have an extensive network that we can help you out. If we can't get to you personally, we have other people we can help you. And I'm so anxious to be talking about the World Junior. It's going to be exciting. We got a lot to look at. There's a lot of Flyers prospects. Can't wait to talk about Steve with it. So, all right, I'll shut up now and let's get started.
Okay. Yeah, well, just before we get rolling, just remind everybody that we're also brought to you by Jim South Street, 40 years of the greatest and grandest Philadelphia steaks, hoagies, and fries in a tradition you'd expect from Philadelphia. And if you live down there, check it out. You can get that delicious food right to your door, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it takes. These really are one of the top 5, and some people say the absolute best cheesesteak. I take it plain without, actually, that you can get in the Philadelphia area. Either way, Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. Tell them FlyersNittyGritty.com and O&B Puckcast sent you down there. You never know what might happen. Anyway, moving right along from the draftanalyst.substack.com and on X at the Draft Analyst. Steve Kournianos, brother. How are you? Great to have you back on.
Great, guys. Hope I find you guys well, and I'm looking forward to the podcast. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and it's that time of year. Just another little footnote. We're hoping that the great Dan Silver will be able to join us tonight. It's real he's a real prospect maven himself when he gets the time, gets away from this horsing around that he's into. And we hope to have him along. So
literal horsing around like he's an equestrian, like he's a
no, he's in a horse racing business actually.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, he travels the world. He's a world traveler. He's a gambler. He's a
all right. When he comes on, I gotta ask him. Anyway, I gotta ask him about Pyomai and what his thoughts on the tragic loss of Pyomai.
Oh yeah, well, he knows more about that than I do. So anyway,
it's a Sopranos reference. It's
Oh, okay, gotcha. Right, yeah. Oh, that was the one.
You ever see the picture of Tony where he's dressed up like a general and he's holding the horse? All right,
I remember the episode because the guy burned it down.
Yeah, exactly. All
yeah,
right. Maybe it's sensitive with Dan. I won't bring it up.
Okay, right. You can separate reality from fiction there. Anyway, so we have the World Junior Championship coming up from Thursday the 26th, and they're deciding the championship on Sunday, the January the 5th, and it's in Ottawa this year. So we have the United States, Canada, Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Slovakia, Switzerland. We also have Germany, Latvia, and Kazakhstan, who I think is new. Give him some static here, so forgive us for that. And so give us a little bit of a primer. What's the buzz this year about the teams, players, and then we'll get into some of the flyers that were there and draft eligibles and stuff like that.
Well, I think the biggest story probably is because it's in Canada, is that the Canadians had a very bad showing last year, and everybody was upset and pointing fingers, and outside of Macklin Celebrini and maybe a few others, they lost in the quarterfinals to Czechia. Oliver Bonk was involved. It was an unfortunate goal. And so the big problem surrounding that team last year was the power play and not finishing. So, we've been paying attention to how Canada was going to build this team. Remember, they played a summer tournament at the U20 level, the WJSS, and they actually played Team USA in a game. But that was Team USA's kind of like their B team, and it was kind of Canada's B team as well. But the point is that, it's a very difficult selection process. So I think all the news really surrounding the Canadian team, because not only do this year, they don't even have that one main guy. They don't have like a star. They don't have a Bedard or a Celebrini. It might be Gavin McKenna, the kid who's eligible for next year's draft. He's the youngest player on the team. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a lot to ask of a kid like, hey, we need you to carry us. So I'm curious to see how it plays out for Canada. The other issue for them is that they're in the same division or group as the U.S., the defending champions, and they're bringing back arguably the best goalie prospect in the world in Trey Augustine. And the thing about Trey Augustine is whatever Team USA does with their roster, I really didn't care that much because it's all going to boil down to Augustine. And, in the last week or so, he's playing great. He just went into Minnesota, the number one team in the country, and swept them. And he also beat Boston College earlier in the season. So he's played a lot of big games. So I don't think he's going to be riled the fact that it's in Canada. So obviously it's going to be USA versus Canada, but it's really just for the group in Group A. The other, I guess, story is, Sweden has the drought, right? They haven't medaled in a while. I think the Zibanejad goal was in 2011. So people are going to be looking at them. Their group is probably the easier of the two, with the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and then I believe they have the Swiss and I think Kazakhstan. So is this the year the Swiss are going to get past the hump? But then the other thing is I'm looking at is Finland. Everyone's crapping on Finland. Oh, Finnish development stinks. They're not good anymore and developing. And I looked at their roster. It's pretty impressive. They got a lot of NHL draft picks, and they've played well in the pre-tournament game. They just blew out Slovakia the other day. So although I think the Americans are the favorite, because they can match any team, offense, defense, but they have a significant edge in goal. They're also bringing back 9 or 10 guys from last year's team that won gold. I don't think any other team can really claim that, right. That many returnees. So it's their tournament to lose, I think. But again, with Canada, they rarely rarely go back-to-back years without a medal. And they were on a pretty good run of silver or gold up until last year. So something's got to it's because I think Canada and the U.S. are playing in the same group. We might not see them in the gold medal game because you have to assume that one's going to be 1, the other one's going to be 2. But then again, Finland could pull off an upset and everything goes to haywire, the projection. So I'm really excited for it, like I am every year. But I'm really curious to see the tournament against Augustine, if he could really, I mean, if he wins back-to-back golds as a number 1, that's pretty impressive stuff, historical stuff.
Yeah, well, who's he drafted by?
Detroit, 2nd-round pick.
Okay. And
Yeah,
they already have Kosa, but he's been slow out of the gate.
Yeah, so, people put Steve Eisenman's getting beat up, because the wings can't get over the hump under his watch, but if he waits a little bit longer, you could have a tremendous 1-2 punch in goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that from the Flyers fan standpoint, there's 2 areas of interest. Number one, there was 5 Flyer players, and we can review them, but there's also draft eligibles. And the Flyers, I believe, have 6 of the first 45 or so picks coming up in this draft. There's a lot at stake. And with what the Flyers are doing, which we're going to get into later as a panel, they're kind of stuck in a spot there. Who are some of the players that if you're talking about maybe like could end up? I know it's a little bit of a crapshoot to guess in anything, but maybe like 7 or 8 through like 45, like who might be represented at any position in this tournament that could catch the eye of the Flyers, and maybe fans at least want to know the name and be somewhat familiar with.
I guarantee you right now that there is a player in this tournament who will be available for the Flyers if they're picking in the top 10. Absolutely. So there is a potential future Flyer, a high-end future Flyer playing in this tournament. Obviously with the lottery, right now the Flyers, I think, are like about 4 points out of the second wild card, and they're still kind of hanging around, but
they're also like 6 points out of like the last place or something,
Yeah, and I know they have like a significant goal differential, like in the negative, and
it's horrendous. They got the 30th worst goaltending.
The power play is back to struggling again. It's just like a never-ending saga. But I think if the Flyers do get a lottery pick, and it looks like they're trending in that direction, there are a bunch of kids that are going to be available in like a reasonable range, but they'd still technically be in the running for first or second overall because they haven't, right? They're not blocked by the new rules, right? They haven't won the lottery in a while. No. Yeah. And on top of that, they, have these multiple picks as well. So they might even just trade up even higher. So I'm not going to write them off for getting the first overall pick, which as of right now could be one of, let's say, 3 or 4 players. But all those players are in this tournament, right? James Higgins, Matthew Schaefer, 3 of them at least, and Porter Martone are almost locks to be top 5 picks,
Right. Yeah, Chef, you go ahead.
So, with Danny amassing all these picks with the trades and stuff like that, we were kind of expecting, that in this draft, we thought it was going to be a little more top heavy in the first 20, 30 or so, that they would be able to get something of use out of it. So if we're looking at it, and is this draft deep enough, in your opinion, to go for the need that they need? It's very obvious when we see they're playing right now, they need that center bad. So is this, when you have it all bunched up like this, because there's a lot of good guys that could probably flip 1 through 5 right now in any particular order. Do you think that this is maybe one of those few times in a draft where you can address your need and still have the best player?
Yeah, I think so. The problem is that this draft was really hyped, right? Not overly hyped because we knew about Higgins. You could say Higgins was on a similar trajectory like a Jack Hughes or someone from, I guess, like a notch below the generational label that we gave Bedard or McDavid. So maybe you don't put Hagens in like an Austin Matthews class, but you could maybe put him in a Lafreniere, and I know Lafreniere's a wing, or Byfield, so like where Matt Beniers, like where it's a good number one overall or top two potential type of pick, but nothing like that you're going to be like, oh my God, we have to stink this year and load up. We thought it was going to be better than last year's draft. And a lot of the kids that we had high up and I say we, I'm talking about like the average fan who's prospects, that guys like Ryabkin, the Russian, was supposed to be he's a center. He's supposed to be a top 3, 5, or 5 pick. He's been benched, demoted. His coach called him out for weight gain, and guy's not scoring. So now you got to then Anton Frondell in Sweden, who's fantastic, and I love him, but he's hurt. He's got a lot of injury issues. And then you have even Misa with the points he's putting up. This the Teddy Bear Toss incident. He staged a fight with Porter Martone. Like, there's just weird stuff going on there. So I'm not getting the warm and fuzzy that I feel. I'm starting to think now that, like, outside of the top 5 or 6, and maybe throw in a couple of guys that we look at as sleepers or fast risers because they look so darn good when they play. I'm talking about like the kid Lakovic and the kids in the WHL Bear Lakovic. That and the NCDP might not even have a first round pick this year. When does that happen? So collectively, weak Russian group, weak NTDP. It's hurting the overall quality, I think, at least the perception wise. It's not looking or feeling like the kind of draft where, oh, thank God we traded we traded this and that to get more picks in 2025. Unfortunately, I got to put that at least right now to bed. But at the same time, we were down on 2017, and that top half turned out to be really good, like very good, like Hall of Fame quality players in that group. So I'm not going to write it off just yet. We're still at December. We have the World Juniors coming up. Players are going to be evaluated on that grand stage, although I don't think it's that big of a deal. And then we have the second half to reassess and see where they're at. But, to answer your question, basically, like, they will be able to get a good player, a very good player, I think within the top, like, 8 or 9. And I'm not just, like, hand-waving that. I think the reality is that's the case for the Flyers right now. But later on, they addressed the center issue last year, kind of with Berglund, Luchenko, Rohonen. So do they attack it again? A lot of the centers in this year's draft aren't really – there are a lot of wingers I'm more impressed with at centers, put it that way, in both Europe and the CHL.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Hagens, Frondell, Misa, and Ryabkin, if he ever goes on a diet, would be the would be the best centers. And I think the Flyers, with the desperation they feel there, I think they're going to take at least a couple shots almost every draft until they really start, hitting on these kids, because it's probably the number one thing that's holding them back from even being a playoff team. I mean they are, like I said, they were mentioned they were 6 points. They're actually 8 points out of last place. So they're kind of right in that middle, because as you know, the spread from Chicago with 26 points to Winnipeg at 51, actually, when you break it down and get near the edge of the playoffs, is really not that great.
No. And there's going to be, a decision point very soon, I think, for the organization. I personally thought that there was a point where they should have, and they mean the Flyers, they should have addressed the goaltending. With all the assets that they've been accumulating, maybe just try to salvage the season. Don't overpay. You don't trade Tuamala. You don't trade Alex Bump, or you don't trade, obviously Luchenko or any of the first round picks, but try to maybe swing a deal for any type of help with in goal. And now look, here we are, December 23rd, and they have an .870 team save percentage. So it's the worst in the league. So, we say that it might be another year for the draft, for the Flyers to focus on the draft earlier than later. But with Tortorella, you never know what he could pull out of his hat. And, it's a hardworking group. They just, they have some issues.
They lack talent. And it is frustrating. There's no doubt about it. And if this draft is going to end up being kind of underwhelming, then what does that say about the plan to kind of push all your chips in the middle of the table for 2025? And
I remember they traded. I'm sorry. They traded one of their picks last year to get a pick this year, right?
Yes.
And that was definitely something that was worth discussing and to an extent scrutinizing. So I don't know if I'm not gonna call this underwhelming, the class underwhelming, but it's different, right? You don't have the 6 elite defense prospects that you had last year. You know what I mean? You don't have that this year. We thought it was going to be center heavy, but like I said, a guy like Ryabkin falling off a cliff, literally. He's just plummeting, and I can't make excuses for him anymore. And then Frondell, who's been great, but again, injuries, he's always hurt. He plays a tournament, he gets hurt. Plays great, then he gets hurt. So maybe that gives a chance for, let's say, some wings to come up, like Malcolm Spence for Erie. Or like I said, Bear and Lakovic. The center Desnoyers in the Quebec League is great. He's a flyer type. Flyers usually draft out of the Quebec League. So maybe he's the guy that vaults past Ryabkin and just solidifies a spot, maybe the top 5. You know, we got, like I said, this whole second half left. So a lot can change.
Yeah, absolutely. So if he's ready, he's been delayed. The great Dan Silver has been kind of taken like last minute or so of this in. He's proud to join us on this holiday edition of the O&B Puckcast. Welcome aboard, Dan.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, sorry for joining late. It's always great to have Steve on, see a smiling face. How's it going, Steve?
Great. We're glad to have you on. I made a little bit of a joke. I asked where you were, and they said you're horsing around. And I thought and they said literally, and I'm like, oh, is he like an equestrian? And they said, no, you're into like horses and racing. So I mentioned Pyomai, and I was just wondering if you knew what I was talking about.
I don't know Pyomai.
Okay, all right. You guys got next time we have a show, we're gonna have a Sopranos refresher, okay? And
that's one of the horses. Is that the horse that he owned in Pyomai?
Yes.
Okay.
And he has a painting of him and everything. Yeah. So
I have a funny Jim Montgomery story actually. So I worked in minor league hockey as a broadcaster for 3 years. And my nickname on the road trips was Bookie, because from the first road trip that we had, I was on my phone like betting the whole time. So the players started calling me Bookie. And then the third year that I was there, Jim Montgomery played for our team. It was, kind of like the end of his playing career. He was down playing in the minors. And he, the first time he met me, we were talking. We were talking about horse racing. And he said, I bet your horse won by a nose. And I didn't know what he was saying. I don't know if you've seen me. I guess I have a fairly big nose. And I didn't think about it at the time, but he was making a joke about my nose and horse racing that went completely over my head. I still think it was like a pretty bad joke, but that's like my
that's definitely a rude thing to say to somebody.
Yeah, that's my
There's no other way around it.
He was a great guy, really great guy, but he made that joke and it was like I didn't.
Maybe this was during his. Didn't he have like a problem? He had like a problem time in his life.
He did have a problem time in his life.
So maybe that was it. I don't know.
Could have been. But
now, I just one last thing about the horses. Do you like Eddie Olchuk? I know he's huge into them.
Yeah, and you know who else is Keith Jones. So
oh wow, all right, good.
When I used to work for the New York Racing Association, I used to get Keith Jones, like Belmont. Yeah, I worked for NYRA. I used to get Keith Jones Belmont Stakes tickets. So I kind of got a little relationship with him. He used to go to Delaware Park all the time, and I used to go there when I was growing up. So I knew him through horse racing before I even knew him through hockey. There's a lot of hockey players who are into horse racing.
You see, I grew up right near Belmont. Belmont was like maybe 15, 20 minutes from my house.
I love Belmont.
Yeah, and I all my neighbors were always going. I was always being offered a chance to go, and I'm like, maybe another time.
What town did you live in?
Say again?
What town did you live in?
Bergen Beach, right on the Queens border, right off the belt.
Yeah, I was in Franklin Square.
Okay, yeah. So that's basically
Good Long
right now,
Island
it's
stuff.
not
And the thing I miss the most about Long Island, for any of our listeners who might be up there, the Italian food is so good.
I'm in Nashville. I feel the same way.
Can't replicate it. But anyway, enough about horses.
We digress.
No, it's
Welcome
okay.
to the O&B Horsecast.
Yeah.
Let's have Mike Francesa on.
The Flyers need more thoroughbreds down the middle, is what they need. So.
Yes, absolutely.
That's true.
I don't know if we're talking about the game that's going on at the moment, but they're getting absolutely stomped by the Penguins.
Oh, okay. No,
What a wacky season, man.
Crazy. Yeah, we don't like doing shows on show nights like I mentioned last game, but hey, it's the holidays, man. And by the way, we got to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah. They're all coming together. Happy holidays, if that's what works for you.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy New Year.
That was an FBI informer holiday. A lot of people don't know that story. Look it up. But yeah, I mean, whatever you celebrate, this is actually going to be the last show that we do the calendar year of 24. So let's get back into it here. We talked earlier before Dan got on about who you think is probably the favorite to win this thing. You like the United States in the back of their goaltending and the depth that they have. Canada a little weak on defense. Like they're not weak so much, but they're outshone by the quality of the U.S. defensemen. And of course, they don't have Augustine in goal. They have a Flyer prospect, Carson Bjarnason, who's probably going to get at least half the games, you think, Steve?
Well, that all depends. Usually what the Canadians do is if they don't have a clear-cut number one, they'll obviously have like someone in mind and start him. Their first game is tough. It's against Finland. So who starts that game? I think the next two games are going to be easy. You're going to have Latvia Germany. I think Germany and Latvia. So whomever you see against Finland and then against the United States on New Year's Eve, chances are that goalie is going to be your medal round goalie. And so, I mean, I would say for the first time in a while, Canada does not have a goaltending problem. That any one of their three guys, Ivan Kovic, George, or Bjarnason, can be the number one, deserving to be the number one. And it's not going to be a situation where, I wonder if this backup can do it at a high level, because George won the U18 gold. Ivan Kovic won the U18 Holinka. They played in big games before. And, of course, Bjarnason has been carrying Brandon this season. So it's a good situation for the defense. The defense, they didn't bring some big names. I mean, they left Zane Parekh and Carter Yakimchuk. Those are top 10 picks. But it's a solid group in terms of what they want them to do, right? Which is keep everything to the outside, move pucks quickly, accurate first passes, play physical if you have to, mostly clean. There aren't a whole lot of risk takers. And so maybe like minimizing that. Guys who are more stronger defensively and not, let's say, inclined to take a lazy penalty because they're getting outworked or outmuscled. Little things like that, I think, played into the decision-making process of picking who they picked on defense. The game against Sweden the other night, I don't know if you guys caught it. It was a very good game for two periods, and then Sweden evaporated in the third period. The Canadian ice, it was just tilted against Sweden the whole time. And the defense looked really good. Bonking, especially, he scored the tying goal with a nice slap shot. So I think it's a very good team. I think it's gold medal caliber. Every Canadian entry is gold medal caliber. But again, you got to beat Augustine twice, man. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's the thing. So let's talk about some of the Flyers that are in the tournament. You mentioned Bjarnason, you mentioned Bonk. I'm sure at some point we'll get into a guy who's almost a Flyer, who I still think they would have taken over their choice, Sam Dickinson. If he was there, I bet you they would have taken him over Lutsenko. That's not a knock on Lutsenko. It was
no, ended up being a reasonable possibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say in terms of progress and watching these kids, what you thought of them when they were drafted and versus what you think of them now as we go into the tournament?
They're all progressing exactly how you want them to progress. I mean, the only thing that with Bonk is that, like, he really has nothing. You'd love to have him in the AHL, like, because London, I'm sure that he wants to win a Memorial Cup. They're really upset about what happened last year. but he's been there. This is, I think, his 4th year now in the OHL, or 3rd or 4th. I think it's his 4th. So, he has literally nothing left to prove there. He's already at an AHL level. So if people want to go off of stats, listen, Dickinson is averaging over 2 points a game. He's always been the more, I guess, willing to jumpstart the offense and take chances and rush the puck end to end and, take a shot without hesitation. Whereas Bonk is more of a guy, he's kind of surveying that, like, not that Dickinson doesn't, but Bonk is more of like, I really have to worry about what's going on behind my blue line at some point. And so that impacts his production. Luchenko, he looked pretty good in camp. I think everybody, when he made the team, there was a voice in our heads saying, maybe he stays beyond the 9 games because he actually doesn't look that bad. But he went back to Guelph and he's still their number 1 main guy. And then Rohonen, he's a college guy. And he's going to Harvard. And so he's playing in the USHL. It's definitely a change, from the European rink to the North American rink. And even the style is a lot less physicality in the Finnish junior league. But at the same time, that league and the USHL are defensive-oriented pro goalie leagues. So you're not going to really measure what Rohonen does scoring-wise as much as what he's like. He's a physical kid. He's a 200-foot type. Can win face-offs. But I think he got hurt. I think he separated his shoulder. He was doing fine. And then he separated his shoulder. He injured his shoulder. And now he's back. I don't know where he fits into this Finnish lineup, though. They might put him on wing like they did at the WJSS in the summertime, because you look at Finland's lineup, like they have specific dudes for specific roles. They have this face-off specialist in Lepa. They have the jack of all trades guy in Alasura. They have Kumpalainen. Of course, Kalenius is going to be the number 1, power play quarterback or orchestrator, whatever. So you're probably going to look at Rohonen playing on the wing. And if he does, it's going to be in a bottom 6 type. And then the last guy, Berglund, in almost the same situation. Sweden is not going to rely on him for offense. If whatever offense you get out of him is going to be gravy. They're going to want him to win face-offs, to be a physical presence, help support down low, because he's a physical kid. And that although teams will be cautious about penalties, it's going to be a physical tournament. So, with Berglund, I was expecting him to spend more time in the SHL with Farjestad. But the J20 team, what they like to do sometimes is they're like, hey, we need help. So they'll take, unless the guy's lighting it up in the SHL, they'll ride that train back and forth. And so with the J20 team, he's back to being the top line center. He's playing with the kid on Switzerland. What's his name? No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a Norwegian kid, Vatne. But yeah, pretty good chemistry with smaller guys, playmaking, penalty killing, tackling for tough top line matchups, things like that for Berglund. So I really don't have an issue. And Bjarnason rebounding with his best season of his career. So he's playing the best hockey since I've been watching him for Brandon. So it looks like he's trending upwards. Remember, after a couple of shaky end of season performances, he's looking pretty good right now. So yeah, if you're a Flyers fan, there's really nothing to be concerned with as far as their development, in my opinion.
Gotcha, Dan.
I want to ask about Oliver Bonk, because when I watch him play, and I definitely haven't seen him play as much as Steve has, he clearly has good hockey sense, and there aren't really any huge holes in his game, but I'm not sure that I see sort of any also elite skills in his game. And he's obviously puts up a lot of points because he's playing the bumper on the power play for London. And that team is so good that it almost seems like a factory. He got a lot of helium, I feel like, last year based on his numbers and sort of how good that team was. And the fact that he is sort of a very solid defenseman. What do you see as his kind of NHL upside? What kind of NHL player do you think he's going to become?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think he's going to put up a lot of points specifically because the coach, this is my prediction, right? So I'm just predicting. I think that he's going to do things so well and he's going to be so coachable, especially on the defensive side and moving the puck, that he's going to be given, I think, a significant role early on. So, like, he'll go to the AHL, and I think he's going to make it impossible for the staff, LePerrier, and he's pretty tough too, to eventually say, no, we're going to just shuffle you in and out. Like, he's definitely a first-round caliber defenseman. I just don't think, like, look at Cam York, right? Cam York quarterbacked the NTDP power play that had Matt Boldy, Cole Caulfield, Jack Hughes, and Trevor Zegras. Okay? So, yeah, he's going to put up 60, 65 points. And there was really no reason for someone like myself to not think that Cam York could go into the NHL eventually and be a significant point producer. The same applies to Jamie Drysdale based on what he did for Erie, what he did at tournaments. And so now we're seeing these are offensively gifted, talented defensemen where you would even say before they got drafted that they're more offense than defense, and they can't even put up points. I'm not knocking them as of like long-term wise. But you're saying as of right now, we're still waiting, right? We're waiting for, let's say, something to happen. So I think that if the Flyers are like, we have offensive mind defensemen in the system, etc., there's definitely room for Bonk to surpass expectations and be a 20-minute-a-night guy and be on the power play, etc. But I think he's going to be so clean defensively when he shows up to AHL camp or training camp that they're going to say, you know what, we want you to solve problems, worry about offense later on, and it might be reflected in his numbers.
So, but you do think that he's going to be a very solid NHL defenseman? You think he could be a top pair guy? I'm not even worried about the power play.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict because look at Braden Schneider. The Rangers are in love with that guy, and he's never played on the top pairing. They've experimented with him there, and he doesn't last. So he's one of like many mid to late round defense prospects that, so let's say, for example, like Rasmus Sandin was a late defense prospect. The Maple Leafs gave him an audition. It was never on the top pairing. Went to the Capitals. They gave him an audition. Occasionally he played 20 plus minutes. So I don't know who the veterans are in the team is going to probably dictate it. Like you have Ristolainen on the contract. You have Sanheim on the contract. Andrea, like what's his role in all of this? So I think a lot of that is going to play into like what happens exactly with Bonk. Like if the best he can do, or the best the Flyers can do for him, no matter how well he plays, is the number 5 and number 6. You take it. You take it. And if you do that, though, you might get pigeonholed and you're known as the support clean guy. And you have to wait probably until they hit closer to UFA age where they're like, hey, I could produce offense. I want to get paid. Look at Jacob Trouba. Guy had 50 points in his contract. Is he a 50-point defenseman? He never pegged me as one. So, but Bonk definitely has the skills to do it. There are a lot of factors involved,
Gotcha, Chef.
I want to bring up his another Flyers pick and his teammate Barkey. The thing about, and we can make arguments, and I know Dan has brought it up before too with Bonk, that they're playing on a very good London, Knights team. So, and judging by the whole structure there, they are performing well, if not even overperforming in some areas. Now, a lot of Flyers fans see the numbers that are getting produced by Denver Barkey and go, how the hell is he not on Team Canada? How did he get left off the bench? As somebody who's not a Flyers fan, well, not a big Flyers fan, who can be objective because you are, what do you tell us, those people that go, I wonder why he got snubbed? Because there's obviously things that we're looking through the most optimistic glass for this team that we have in a while, and we kind of want sometimes things to work out definitely. Is Denver Barkey for real, and what are his chances? A lot of us in this think he's more of a tweener or maybe a fourth line guy.
Yeah, and even if you get that, that's good. That's not the worst thing in the world, because look where you drafted him. So you're going to there's always examples of guys who put up big points in junior and they have to reinvent themselves the second they get to the AHL. And there are guys that put up great numbers in the AHL, and when they get to the big show, they're nothing more than a checker or energy guy, a pest, whatever. So I think I'm surprised Barkey didn't make it. I thought that Barkey was going to make it because he's a good penalty killer and he's a momentum changing kind of a player, that type. But it looks like Team Canada, like they left. It was a weird. I don't say it's weird because they still have a good team, but they did not select guys that you wonder why did they not select them. So like my thing was, I understand getting Porter Martone because he's a big body, he's got a lot of skill, he could be good on the power play, and he's got chemistry with Rykov. But like Malcolm Spence is an elite penalty killer, and when he played against the USA at the U18 Worlds, when he played against the USA at the JSS, he was causing all kinds of problems. I'm like, so if you're not going to take Malcolm Spence, who's bigger than Barkey, and you're going to go for guys that, you're going to forget Crystal, you're going to forget Seneca, Riley Height, like they a lot of guys. But so I don't know. I really can't explain why Barkey was left off other than smartest guys in the room type thing. We want to assemble the best team, not the best players, but he was deserving of making it. As far as like his numbers and his play in London, like you and Dan said, I mean, that team has only one goal this year, and that's to win the Memorial Cup. So I don't think any of them really care about the way the stats look. And I think we could use a lot of NHL examples where teams, look at Florida, they were great in 2020, was it 22? And they lose to Tampa. And then the next year they dropped in points like significantly and went all the way to the Stanley Cup final as a wild card. And then before winning it last year. So like things like that are going to happen. But I think the way London plays, like their structure, the system, it's a very unselfish kind of a thing. And so, you're playing with Dickinson, you're playing with Cowan, you're playing with Bonk. There's just Holton in, those guys like to shoot. So I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I think he's really good. I think he's going to go to the AHL and make players work harder and, be wary of him when he's on the ice, but I don't know if we're going to say his 100 plus points or whatever was last year is going to mean he's going to be a scoring star in the NHL.
You're muted.
Gotcha. I'm having a great night tonight. So you mentioned Alex Bump. Just curious, he's always been an interesting player, maybe has a little bit more talent from where he was drafted.
Yeah.
How's he progressing? And do you think he's going to be any kind of contributor at the NHL level?
Well, I mean, listen, this is his second year in college. He's, I would say, one of the top two players on Western Michigan. And if he's not one of the top two players statistically, he looks like one of their two best players every time he's on the ice. So, I have a feeling the staff there, and they like to play a hard-nosed game. They like to play physical, aggressive, kind of like similar to Michigan State. And so when you play Michigan Tech, you're not going to really waltz all over them. And Bump, he's listed at like 6 foot, but he plays like he's 6'3", 220. But in addition to that, though, you still get, like, I saw him play against Boston College, best team in the country. And this was earlier in the season, and they didn't have an answer for him. Now, he had an unfortunate turnover at the end that cost them the game. But, listen, that's what you want. You want your mid-round picks to be go-to guys on their post-draft teams and, looking confident with the puck. And the thing with him is his skill set. It's not just one thing. He could pass, he could skate, he could shoot. He could muck it up in the corners. Very hard to knock off the puck, so he could protect it for a long time. So I listen. I ain't gonna lie, man. I ranked him like 35th overall. I took a big gamble on him because he absolutely manhandled the Minnesota high school circuit against kids who are highly touted prospects. So I'm partial to Bump, and and so far so good.
Okay, so Steve, anything else in this tournament that comes to mind that we as fans should look for or watch out for? This player, this team. I mean, I know Kazakhstan had been in relegation. New this year. Was Norway relegated out?
Yeah. That was the game last year where Germany won in overtime. So they don't do the 2 out of 3 best 2 out of 3 right or best 2 out of 3 relegation. They just do a single game knockout. And I think Norway rallied back. I think it was Norway who rallied with Germany. It was a wild game, and then the kid Florian Elias, I think is his name, who scored the game winner. So Germany survived. Here's the thing about the German U20 team. I want to say keep an eye on something. Their U20 team didn't win a single game this year at like between 4 different tournaments or 3 different tournaments. They didn't win a single game. Lost every one of them, about like 9 or 10 games. Then they go and they have a pre-tournament game against Kazakhstan, and they beat them. So that was their first win. So I think they're going to be those 2 teams will be cannon fodder. The bottom 2 teams will be cannon fodder in each group. Latvia, Kazakhstan, Germany, and who am I missing?
Slovakia or Switzerland?
No, not okay. So no. Switzerland's going to be okay. You know why? They have the goalie Kirsch. The kid's Kirsch is very good, and they're bringing back a whole bunch of guys from last year. So the Swiss might be one of my surprise teams. The last thing I'll say about the World Juniors, and we talked about it, is the number of top-rated draft prospects. So although we know who the top guys are, we have to prepare mentally for the media to identify a favorite specifically off of this tournament. All right. So if Hagens has 5 points and Martone has 2 points, and Hagens has like a play that leads to a win, then I don't operate this way. I'm just saying this is how it works. Right. So you're going to see that narrative potentially change. As of right now, I think it's really between Hagens and Schaefer more than anybody else. And Schaefer, this is the big one. Schaefer is the best defense prospect I've seen since Rasmus Dahlin. And I would say he's even better than Dahlin in his draft year. And Canada doesn't really promote first-year eligible defensemen. And if they do, they're not going to say, well, we want you to quarterback the power play, which is what they did with Schaefer against Sweden the other night. And he had some moments, but he's still like, so is this going to be a situation where the number 1 defenseman in the draft overtakes the number 1 center in the draft, and that is versus the number 1 power forward in the draft, which is Martone. So Martone, Hagens, Schaefer. It's going to be a mini battle for number 1, if you want to call it that.
Interesting. Flyers need all 3 positions. Center the most, but they need a power forward, and they certainly could use an alpha dog on defense. And if Schaefer looks like that guy, and you're comparing him to Dahlin, then
No, Schaefer is going to be number 1, I would say, on at least half the lists as of right now. He's that good defensively. I mean, he's basically mistake free. He had like 3 significant mistakes the other night against Sweden, one that led to a goal against, and he still had a great game. I mean, that's the kind of player that he is.
I don't know if you guys talked about it before I joined with Steve, but what do you see the role for Jet Lachenko on Team Canada as?
That's a good question. I don't know, to be honest with you. The way that they used him in the summertime with the power play, the penalty kill, and the face-offs, then I'm like, could it be a top 6 situation? But I don't know if there's, and it's we have to be fair to the other guys. I don't want to say that Lachenko isn't one of the best center prospects that the CHL has. But when you look at the guys, so they brought back Jaeger. He's a center. He's got age and experience. They brought Catton, who was drafted higher, and probably you'd say, gun to your head, you're going to take Catton over Lachenko. And then they brought, Cole Baudouin, who's a first-year guy, a post-draft guy like Lachenko, but he's a face-off, checking, penalty-killing kind of guy. So I don't know. I think he's going to be on the penalty kill. And I would say if the power play struggles in the beginning, they might if they go to a 1 defenseman, 4 forward set, I would think it's smart to have Luchenko on one of the half walls. I would. You know what I mean? So, but then again, you could say the same thing about, Catton. Callum Ritchie is a center, but is he going to be running PP1? I don't think so. So I think 5-on-5, you probably won't see Luchenko as prominent as you will see on special teams, if that makes sense.
No, definitely makes sense. So that was the last one from me. Anybody else? Yeah, Chef.
I would just say, who's your call to win? Who wins it? I would say Team USA.
Yeah,
I'm leaning toward Team USA this year.
They're in the tougher bracket, so if they do it, they'll have earned it, because you're looking at wins over Finland and Canada, one of them probably twice, and Sweden or the Czech, so you'll have earned it. My dark horse is Finland, though. My dark horse is Finland, because I think they feel like they have a lot to prove, that everyone's against them. And I looked at their roster. I was compiling it. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty talented team. So yeah, but I think it's going to be, you're not going to beat Augustine twice. I just can't see that happening.
Interesting.
I've got one for Steve.
Yeah,
not related to this, but we talked a lot about Michkov and Bedard the last time you were on, Steve, and now we've got a chance to see Michkov play this year. Because we talked about how the last time they were on the same ice together, Michkov, you could argue, outplayed Bedard. What have been your impressions so far this year of Michkov, and has it changed any of your thoughts about him? What are your thoughts now that he's in the NHL?
Everything is working out. Everything is working out. I mean, it's working out for the organization. It's working out for the box office. It's working out for the fans. It's working out for the Flyers to an extent. I know that in the beginning, when the power play was clicking and Michkov was fully behind it, you're like, all right, I could get used to this. But obviously, the ebbs and flows of a season, you're going to have slumps, you're going to have droughts, etc. And that looks like, I think he's stuck in a little bit of a one. But remember, he went head to head with Bedard this year. And what happened after that game? After that game, Michkov outplayed him, and then Bedard was like, I have to reevaluate, or I forgot what he said. He's like, I'm disappointed in my play. Like, that's a big deal. I mean, if you said that a week or two before the 2023 draft, you would have been chastised and, eviscerated and mocked and etc. Because Bedard was the golden boy and he was untouchable. And there was a group of us that were like, okay, let's keep things in perspective, though. That there was a point where Michkov outplayed him, outproduced him, and that what he's doing in the KHL should be considered just as impressive as what Bedard's doing in the WHL, because they were both setting records for their ages, right? So, and then here we are. They're basically tied in points, but Bedard's has an extra year on him. He obviously has a lot of work to do in other areas, but I mean, if I'm a Flyer fan, I'm not complaining at all. 7th overall pick, and he's already one of the top young players in the league.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about him. What's funny is, and I don't know if we talked about Celebrini the last time we were on, but, I watch him, and obviously I love Michkov. He's a Flyer. He's so good offensively. I'm not so sure that Celebrini isn't a better hockey player than both of those guys. Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting call to race. But Celebrini he's been a 5-on-5 difference maker and a line driver. Not that what Michkov should have 15 more points. So people need to realize that he has delivered some dimes that were not converted. But again, if you asked me if I'd rather have the sniper wing Ovechkin or the do it everything winner, Taves at their respective primes or peaks, I'm going to take Taves, right? So, but Celebrini is not Taves. I think he's going to score more than Taves. We might be looking at a potential McKinnon situation. So, it's good for the league. It's good competition. But I think I agree with you that, but Celebrini is just at the end of it all a better player.
No doubt. So, Steve, where can people find your work, and what is there anything that you're working on that you want people to know in coming up real soon?
Well, it's just it's full out World Junior Championship coverage. I'm going to drop my podcast, my preview, probably in a couple of days. You can find that on my Substack. And then I'm going to try to recap as much as I can for every day of the World Juniors. The only thing is my focus will be almost strictly on the draft eligibles, overagers, first year eligible types. That's what I really care about. I'll identify the battles within the battles and who's doing well, whose prospects NHL wise is doing well. But I'm being a draft guy. Like, this is what I care about. I care about how well they do in head-to-head matchups. And we're going to see Martone and Schaefer against Hagens. We're going to see Eklund potentially against those guys. So, it'll be fun for me.
Great. Appreciate having you on. Look forward to having you on again very soon.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Happy holidays.
Yeah, you
All
too.
right,
We'll
you
talk
too.
more horses next time, Steve, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do a horses show.
You
All right,
take
guys.
care now.
Yep.
Right. So, gents, here we are on a game night. Oh my God, I hate recording on a game night.
They're coming back.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
coming
that's
back,
5.
and then they just took a little dagger.
Yep. Got to make that save.
Second, I didn't
I'm
see
not
it.
watching.
Second intermission.
So, all right, let's bring it up then. I'll bring it up. Goalie situation's kind of weak right now. There's a lot of softies and a lot of, let's say, momentum saves that haven't been made, and yet they still win that one the other night, 2 nights ago. And looks like there's a couple momentum saves or ones he should have had back tonight. I've just seen clips that pass through on Twitter, but it's getting to a frustrating point here. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, they're
how do we
ranked
fix this?
27. No, they're ranked 30th in the league overall in goaltending and 32nd in goals saved above expected. So, essentially, what Kevin Kurz was saying about the biggest mistake that Danny Briere made was not getting a veteran backup to give the insurance they needed with Urson, and basically making him the number one, and then having Fedotov, who you knew nothing about, and then the whole situation with Kolosov. And Kolosov is basically telling the organization how his career is going to go. I mean, that's what it seems like. And it's been a disaster, and it's like 840ville or something. It's
Yeah, I mean, it seems like.
But then go ahead, Dan.
No, I was going to say it seems like how far away are we from Fedotov getting more starts now, right? I mean, he was the clear-cut number 3, and now Urson and Kolosov have been so bad recently that I won't be shocked if Fedotov starts getting some starts. So it's the goaltending is a mess right now. It's making it very difficult for this team to stay in games and compete, and it's just ugly to watch.
Yeah, it really is.
And yet they're scoring, which is a total surprise probably to everyone. And ever since we made a joke on the last show with Rachel from Locked On, and we talked about the big producer, we want to see more out of all lines, and Noah Cates and Tyson Forrester line. And I'll be damned if they haven't just turned on the Jets, and they've been actually pretty good. I think Noah Cates scored again tonight. Brink, and they're actually playing very good, that line. And if we could just get some more consistency out of the top 2 lines, I mean, you're going to need it now, because they are scoring goals. Their goals have come up, but that if they could just stop a couple, I mean, how many of these have we lost on empty netters now? Because of bad saves. So,
well, it's not with that. I mean, I can't stand the way Tortorella pulls a goalie like 4 minutes to go. I mean, sometimes it's ridiculous. Somebody gave him some numbers and he ran with them, but I mean, it's to even get to that point. So the Flyers, since our last show, are 1-2. They're 15-15-4 going into this Penguins game. As we're recording, they're down 5-3 in the second intermission. So they lose to Detroit Turnoverville, just really frustrating loss. They played better the first two periods versus the Kings, and then the wheels totally fall off. Still can't get a momentum save. And then the whole thing with Columbus, where I turned it off for a while. They would turn the puck over. First, it was Drysdale turn the puck over. Then Urson makes a play, basically turns the puck over, and they come back from 5-4. They get 4 points from Owen Tippett, a goal and 3 assists, including the overtime winner. And then we have the whole drama with York being sat out and Andrae being sent, Dan, to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And I think some bad reads. But Bill Meltzer was saying he hasn't really played as well since he got hit by Matthew Olivier. And so it's kind of like a mixed, I guess, story with the player. And a lot of people are up in arms over it. What say you?
Yeah, but I guess they want Andrae to go down and, I don't know, get back to the basics or something in the AHL. I mean, the thing is, even if you want to argue that he hasn't played as well since he took that hit, I still think he's better than half the defensemen on this team. So it's I think people are up in arms because for a good 2-week stretch, he was the best defenseman on the team. I mean, maybe you could argue that Sanheim was better, but Andrae was making more offensive plays. Andrae looked better than anyone else quarterbacking that top power play unit. You heard Steve earlier talking about, Cam York and Jamie Drysdale as guys that have had success in the juniors on the power play and in the, U.S. national development team. Well, those guys haven't had a whole lot of success in the NHL on the power play. And Emil Andrae, to me, looked like the kind of take charge guy who could be a top unit quarterback. So there just seemed to be this big disconnect when they sent him down, and John Tortorella said that it was, quote unquote, a no-brainer to send him down to the AHL, because when you watch the games, he certainly looks like one of the more impactful, aggressive defensemen on the team. Now, he did make a decent amount of mistakes. He was caught in no man's land on a pretty big goal against, I don't know, was that the Detroit game? Where, he got blown around sort of right inside the blue line and the other team scored a big goal. I'm sure that Torts didn't like that. So there are things that I'm sure he can work on. I'm just not sure why he can't work on those in the NHL. But, look, needless to say, it's still a rebuild. And I guess they feel like it's best for his long-term development to go down to the AHL. I mean, he's clearly a bad version of Emil Andrae, to me, is much better than a good version of Egor Zamula. So it is what it is.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Dan, but I'll bring up this. The one thing I think that could be dreadful for an NHL defenseman is indecisiveness and gun shy. You've seen it. You see it a lot with NFL quarterbacks when they get hit. They become gun shy. They're always worried about the hit, and it really affects their decision making. I mean, does anybody else see hesitation in his game since then? And is this a possible way to kind of get out? All right, you ain't got to worry about the NHL players. Get your thought patterns back in line. Play a couple games down with the Phantoms. I also think too, it's a victim of the three-headed monster at goal too. I think it's a combination of three things. It was bad play, indecision, and gun shyness, plus 3 goalies here. I think it was a triple threat factor. And when he said, or what Torts might have said, it was a no-brainer because of all those things that factored in. That's my assessment, and that's the only thing I can think of that makes it palatable for me, because I really want to see him up there. I think, to his credit, he's played, and he's a lot better option. He's probably their best option at D on the power play.
Well, I mean, I counted 4 reasons there to just, I was keeping score. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to respond to the indecisiveness. I mean, maybe gun shy in terms of getting injured, although I didn't see it, but I certainly didn't see any indecisiveness from him, especially in the offensive zone. I mean, I still think he's being way more aggressive in the offensive zone than a guy like Zamula has been, even after the injury or whatever happened to him. So I haven't seen him really being indecisive. I still think he's being aggressive. Maybe the play in the defensive zone that we talked about is an example of being caught in no man's land, but I have not seen an indecisive player out there. You want to look at an indecisive player, I look at someone like Egor Zamula, who, I don't know, he doesn't seem to make many aggressive offensive plays during the course of a game to me. But
he can't even process. That's his problem. He just can't react fast enough.
His mind doesn't keep up with the game. He's just out of it's too fast for him.
So yeah, I'm not sure with Andre. I haven't seen indecisiveness, but I can understand if they want him to find his game back in the AHL. But I think he should be back up pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Zamula is like the gunfighters in Lago from High Plains Drifter. They're bragging about how the man with no name can't keep up with the things, or a little bit too fast for him, and before you know it, they're up in Boot Hill. But yeah, Zamula, like, God bless him, he scores tonight. I didn't see the goal. We'll get feedback. He just doesn't move fast enough, doesn't think fast enough, and I think part of it could be that they feel like he's back to not protecting himself as a smaller player too.
Maybe.
And he's putting himself in some tough spots, like with the Olivier hit. So they want him to have more polish, because if he gets into this kind of syndrome where he's getting hit because he's not protecting himself, then he's playing with more tentativeness, and there is that indecision or lack of decisiveness that they, were so excited about, and they want to remind him that he's got to get into better habits, because one bad thing leads to another bad thing. And I'm just guessing as I say that, but it doesn't frustrate me. I think the thing that frustrates me more than anything, you're starting to get contributions from Tippett and Forster, like Chef was saying. Clearly, Bobby Brink is a force. He's not like a top six kind of force, but for a guy playing in the middle six, he has a much better than average hockey IQ for a guy in playing his role. He's physically stronger, skating faster, so he looks a little bit better. Still deficiencies in his game. So in other words, you're starting to get some offensive contributions, the 27th ranked power play notwithstanding, but and then the goaltending just falls off a cliff. And maybe you're right. I mean, Fedotov, the other day when he was talking about Andrae, he was also saying we have both goalies. And I think Charlie O'Connor asked Tortorella whether does he anticipate Fedotov getting a start anytime soon, and he said no. So again, when things go wrong, I don't know how long that's sustainable, because they're going to have to make some kind of changes. So we'll see what happens tonight. I'm not, overly optimistic that they're going to pull this one out. It's good to see that they came back, but at some point, the goaltending situation is going to drag them down, and they're only 8 points out of last place. I mean, they're right now, they could very conceivably be a lottery team, and number one factor behind that, Dan, is going to be the goaltending. I don't know what else to say about that. And you already have Jonesy out there. We talked about it last show, that Flyers are definitely going to be sellers in the mode that they were last year.
Yeah, and we talked about that in the last show. I mean, they're going to be sellers. We've kind of known this for a long time now, unless they were sort of like firmly entrenched in a playoff spot, which I don't think they're going to be. So that's what a lot of it's going to be about after we get past the new year, get past the World Juniors, especially, the Four Nations. So yeah, I expressed my fears on the last show about a guy like Ristolainen getting injured. He's probably our most marketable trade asset that I think that they'll be willing to part with. So hopefully he can avoid his yearly injury that seems to happen to him at some point. Scott Lawton, I'm not convinced that they're ever going to move on from him. I just feel like he's the kind of guy that'll end his career as a Flyer. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see what kind of moves they can make in season. But it seems like the kind of move where you're going to get someone who could potentially be your center for the future, or someone you think could be, maybe like a Dylan Cousins or something. I'm not sure that's the kind of trade that happens during the season, since Buffalo is not the kind of team that's going to be trading to try and get into the playoffs. So we're going to have to kind of see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many super marketable assets they have that they're going to be looking to move. And I had a couple people had asked me to post my updated Flyers roster sheet, which I'd sort of updated. Yes. You know, they're not exactly in a great spot for next summer, because you've got $3 million being added onto the contract of Travis Konechny. You've got the money that's going away is you've got Tony DeAngelo, like $1.7 million, and Cal Peterson, $3.8 million, because that's what's being buried right now. So that's about $5.6 million. And then you've got unrestricted, and then Eric Johnson's $1 million is going to go away. But then you're going to have to re-sign Cam York, most likely. You're going to have to re-sign Tyson Forster. Travis Konechny's contract goes up. You're going to have to see if you want to re-sign Frost and Cates. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of difference in cap relief for next season. Plus, I think Matvei Michkov is going to hit a bunch of his performance bonuses. So that bonus overage number, which was only at $245,000 for this year, is probably going to be a lot higher next year. Now, I know the cap is going to go up a decent amount for next season, but I don't think it's going to be a great situation for next season either.
Yeah, you know, I don't think Frost, York, or Ristolainen. I think if you want to pick three players that might not be here who have a decent cap hit, I think there's three right there.
You think they might move on from York?
I think they're going to try to get somebody to at center, and I think it might be what's required. You're going to have to get have some defensive prospects. They say they're still in a rebuild, but I tell you, if they don't do something about this situation at center, it's going to crush them. And I don't think they're going to play this game with Frost. I don't care what Frost can do. If he's only going to play half a season, then he can't play here. And Tortorella doesn't like him anyway. So what else would they trade to get somebody like a center? Yeah. It would take like a Farabee and a York or something like that in some kind of trade.
Depends on the center.
The value is even down.
Yeah. Also, too, I mean, that's why I said I think a bulk of those picks that if Steve is right and this draft is just regular, maybe that's how you pursue it. Maybe you're pursuing stuff in draft picks, and we'll give you, York and Farabee and 2 2s and a 1 for a center, or to move up to get one. Who knows? I mean, at least there's a little bit of options. It's not the best options, but, what are the odds of you signing, 6 of the first 45 picks anyway? It's probably, you might be lucky to sign half of that. So maybe your mind thinks and go, oh, okay, eventually, we could still get 3 players, which is what would hit at 50%, which would be, humongous for this team to hit 50% of their first, their first 42, first 6 picks. I think that would be amazing if they could actually do it.
Well, I mean, it's really, the top 2 picks,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but they have 2 first rounders. Is that right? Right now?
3
for next year.
3.
No, they have 3 first rounders. They have their first rounder. They have Colorado's first rounder, and they have Edmonton's first rounder.
Right. And then
they have 3 second-round picks. They have their second-round pick. They have Columbus's second-round pick, and they have Anaheim's second-round pick. So they theoretically could have 6 picks in the top 45. But again, it doesn't look like this draft is like all that great. So I don't know. What are you going to do with these picks? It's not like you're going to be able to trade all 6 picks to get number 2 and take James Hagens or Matthew Schaefer. So that's where it's going to kind of, we're going to have to see what they end up doing. I'm sure that they will.
It seems like
throw in some of these picks for some of these trades they're going to try and make.
Yeah. They're going to have to. I mean, you could. Last year's seemed to have more stud players. as it turned out. And that's how you never know with the draft. And that's why it's so difficult when you trade out of a draft and you're playing these little games where you're moving up and down, you might outsmart yourself. I mean, when they took Cam York, it turned out, of course, you can do this with any draft. The Matthew Boldy would have been a better player. And now I like Cam York. He's a nice, solid player, but he doesn't really move the needle in terms of being a difference maker. So, of course, that was kind of sort of another regime. They've had a lot of different scouts hired since then, but you do have the same guy running it. But we'll see. And last year, well, I think we all know how I feel about that. I like Luchenko, and we have our fingers crossed. So I guess the frustration is, and I'll just say this, in my opinion, as we're going to start closing the show, and so we can watch the third period. We all want to watch it. Maybe a miracle will happen, a Christmas miracle for the Flyers versus the Penguins. This has to be the last year that they play this game of, we're on a rebuild, year 3 of Torts, and they're not really moving the needle on the ice on the pro side. I mean, just collecting a whole bunch of picks in an okay draft where you're picking, like, maybe this year they might get like a number 7 or 8. But after that, you're middling, picking the middle of the first round. It's a loser. You can't go anywhere with this. They have to start making things happen. And they're going to start think about it. All the effort in 3 years, that by the time next year rolls around, they'll have blocked shots, listen to Tortorella and all of his crap, and the way he's basically a martinet for 3 years going. That's 250 games, not counting all the exhibitions, the practices, and all that kind of crap. And to not get anything out of it more than what they've had so far. No playoff appearances and all that. We all understand that's part of a rebuild. I don't think that's sustainable. I really don't. They have to see progress on the ice with the pros. This is the last year they can develop and claim, hey, we're in a rebuild. They have to start moving the needle. They don't have to say, hey, we're a cup contender next year. No, let's not get crazy. But they should be a favorite to make the playoffs with the moves they make in this offseason, combined with whatever they expect from some of the young kids going into next year. That's how I feel. I don't think you can just keep biding your time, because that's how it all fell apart for Ron Hextall, really.
Yep.
How can you keep
Agreed.
going back as a pro year in and year out, knowing you basically have no chance, and you're in a major market? It's not like you're in Arizona or you're in Buffalo or you're in Ottawa with an arena that nobody wants to go to. It's unsustainable in Philadelphia. That's what I believe. So, Dan, what's your feeling? Am I just mouthing off nonsense there, or am I making any sense?
Kolosov just made a really good save on Crosby. But what I was going to say was it's going to be interesting to see what happens if, let's say, we're sitting here 2 years from now and talking, and the team still is kind of mediocre, because Hextall, they were kind of able to the alumni galvanized people against him, and the ownership kind of galvanized against him. Now we've got this love triumvirate with, Dan Hilferty and Danny Briere and Torts and Keith Jones, and they all love each other, and they've all got it figured out, and they know what it's going to take to get this team back to relevance. And we're all just sitting here hoping and praying that they're correct and they know how to do it right. But if they don't know, exactly what they're doing, and, we keep taking London Knights because Keith Jones loves them, and Oliver Bonk turns out to be a bust, whereas Gabriel Perreault would have been really good, and they should have taken Zev Buium over Luchenko. Like, if all these decisions are adding up, and Jamie Drysdale, if the rumors are they could have gotten Marco Rossi for Cutter Gauthier, and instead they got Jamie Drysdale, and if Drysdale doesn't pan out, like if it turns out that this group of guys is not the group that's going to lead us to the promised land, I'm not sure that there's anyone who's going to get rid of them. I think Hilferty, they're just going to double down on, these are the guys, and we've had some bad luck, and so that's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully we don't have to deal with that, because hopefully these guys do lead us to the promised land. But if they don't, it is going to be interesting to see kind of how long we just kind of ride it.
Yeah, I don't think because of the Hextall experience, I think a lot of the advantages that you cited that give them a little bit of cushion, that I think that only let them in the door. and gave them a grace period. I'm basically saying the grace period's over starting next year.
Yeah.
So
I
Well,
believe
who's
that's
going
what
to
I feel.
enforce that?
I think Hilferty is going to see that when the seats are empty again, I think that's what really makes a difference. And it won't be because like there'll be somebody above him, like there might have been with like Scott and all that. These people were tuning everything out. They didn't really care. You could tell they weren't really into hockey. I mean, I remember the Hockey News where they had the power issue and all that, where Dave Scott was talking about the Flyers for about 2 minutes, and the rest of it was all about the different Comcast projects and the reconstruction at the Wells Fargo Center. I mean, they were obviously disconnected from the fan base, and that's not the case here. I think Hilferty will say, hey, you know what? It's not really working out. If he's as good an executive and as effective as he's been in other capacities, he'll see they've had long enough and they've clearly made bad decisions. I'm not willing to go there yet, but starting next year, the clock is on. That's the way I feel. So this is our last show of 2024. And I'll make a final statement. I just want to say thank you to all the people that have been with us this calendar year. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. And we really do appreciate all of your listenership. And, hopefully the Flyers can be better and can be more fun to follow in calendar year 2025. The Flyers are going to be away for a while on the West Coast, and then they have a couple games on the road. They end up in Las Vegas after going to San Jose, LA, and Vegas. And then they're in Toronto on the 5th of January. And then before they come home on the 7th against the Maple Leafs. So it's kind of like a back-to-back. And in between those two Toronto games, we come back. And we'll talk to you then. Chef?
Well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate. And if if you truly believe in Santa, put let's see if you can get the Flyers a center, maybe a goalie or something like that. And if you want to argue with us about it, by all means, hit us up on X, hit us up on Facebook, whatever you like. Just remember, it's the holiday season. Be kind, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Dan?
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. I like what Chef said about be kind. Be kind to everyone. Everyone's dealing with a whole lot of stuff. We got a lot of stuff going around. And enjoy some Flyers hockey. Try to. Hopefully things turn around. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the Ducks come to town. I'm going to that game with my folks. I think January 11th, maybe. Cutter Gauthier hopefully comes to town and we get to boo him. At least Philly fans can come together to boo somebody. But yeah, hopefully they can kind of find themselves on this road trip a little bit. But yeah, more importantly, happy holidays, everyone. Kind of enjoy the time with your family, with your friends, whoever you're going to be spending it with. And just remember, there's more important things than hockey out there. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. And this time of year, definitely is a reminder of that. So, we appreciate when you subscribe. It moves us up the charts. When people are looking for a Philadelphia Flyer podcast, we're in like a dozen podcast platforms. We have a Facebook page, YouTube channel. Just plug in there, O&B Puckcast. We really, really do appreciate it. And unless after the trade freeze, which ends on this Saturday, the 28th, unless there's something else that goes on, we'll see you January 6th. And Kevin Durso has given us the okay. So we'll be back with a show talking about the Flyers Western road trip. So until then, everybody, thanks for listening tonight and in 2024. And take care. Have a wonderful holiday. See you later.